Good morning from Ann Arbor, or good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you might be. This is Sujin Kwan. I'm the Managing Director for Full-Time MBA Admissions and Program here at Michigan Ross, and I'm joined here by a few of my colleagues on the Admissions Committee, whom I'll introduce and have introduce themselves in a minute, but I wanted to say thank you for joining us. We're excited that you have submitted or will be submitting an ask for round two, and what we want to do today is talk about some tips that we want to share with you based on what we've been seeing in the round one apps so far. And they're good, and we want yours to be great. So here we go. We're going to move on to the next slide.
Technical difficulty.
Okay.
Let's try it.
So we're going to talk about, I will talk about Michigan Ross. We're going to give you some admissions tips and then go through some frequently asked questions, and then we'll give you a chance to ask some questions through the chat box. So you are all on mute. Feel free to submit questions as we go along, and folks on this picture will be answering your questions in the chat box. So let me have the two who are going to be joining me verbally right now.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Michael Lippert. I'm one of the Senior Associate Directors of Admissions on the team. This is my 5th year on the team, so I've seen a number of applications, a number particularly this year. I have a 4-month-old, so I've been traveling less and reading applications more. But I also watched my wife go through the application process and saw how she approached it, so happy to share some tips today.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. I'm Brian Johnson, another Senior Associate Director here on the admissions team, also a Ross alum, and I've been on the admissions team for about 6 years now. Very excited to read another round of applications. They keep getting better and better, and we really are excited to give you some tips today.
And then behind the scenes in the chat room are Meredith and Elizabeth.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. I'll be answering your questions, so feel free to type them in the chat box. Thanks again for joining.
And both of them are just returning from travels to Asia and India. They conducted the round one team exercise in India
And Shanghai.
So they can share some tips on how those went as well. Okay, an overview of our class. Can you make that go away on the side? This is the class that's just entered. We have 422 students, and the GMAT average, as you can see, is 719. What we're really excited about is 45% women. That's close to parity, which is very exciting. Our U.S. minorities are 22%, and our countries represented in the class were 33 from all over the world. Some key differentiators about Ross that you might want to know in case you're invited to interview or weave into your applications. So we have the biggest breadth and depth of hands-on learning of any school out there. If you learn best by doing, there is no school better than Michigan Ross. You will not just learn in class, but you'll get to apply what you learn in different ways through our co-curricular programming, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. There are only 2 schools in all of the business schools in the U.S. that have 9 of 10 business specializations ranked in the top 10. One of those is Michigan Ross, which is why we have it on the slide, the other one being Stanford. We are also only one of 2 schools that have more than 100 top 10 ranked graduate programs. The other one, again, being Stanford. Why that matters to you is that it gives you access to disciplines and faculty and students who are in these fields, and those schools are top ranked. You can take classes in those schools or be in class with students from those programs. We're also ranked #1 in alumni effectiveness by The Economist. And what that means for you is when you reach out to a Ross or Michigan alum, they're going to be there for you. They are going to be responsive and excited to talk with you about your passions, your interests, and about the network. So if you haven't heard about MAP, it's called the Multidisciplinary Action Project, and it's a 7-week full-time consulting project that students engage in at the end of their first year. So our academics are broken out into a quarter system, and the last quarter, the last 25% of your first year experience will be dedicated to this consulting experience. Last year we had 85 projects across 29 countries. The projects span from corporate to nonprofit to startups all over the world, and you get to choose. We give students a list of 100-ish projects. Close to the end of December, you get to review what the challenge is for each organization, and then you get to rank your top 15 choices, and then we match people up based on their interests and their experience onto teams of 4 to 6 students. So this is almost the equivalent of a summer internship. When you figure that a summer internship is typically about 10 weeks, doing a 7-week consulting project is something that is meaty enough to put on your resume and gain significant experience from. So I mentioned that one of our key differentiators is experience-driven learning or hands-on learning, and these are just a few of the dozens of opportunities that we have for students to learn by doing. I'll talk about a couple of them. So the Leadership Crisis Challenge puts you and a small team of other MBA students in the limelight. You are playing the roles of the CEO, the CFO, the CMO of an organization that's facing a crisis, and you will have to answer to your board of directors and then to a panel of real life journalists, and then answer their questions about how you as a C-suite will respond to the crisis. We also have 5 student-led investment funds that manage over $10 million in real money. And so you, with a team of other students, will get to decide where to put those investments. Our career outcomes were very strong this past year. As you can see from the slide, more than 2/3 went to those 5 locations. Well, it's 4 plus international. But in case you were wondering whether students will be primarily in the Midwest, you can see that they go to both coasts as well as outside of the U.S. One of the significant things about Michigan Ross jobs is that 89% of our students are career changers. That means they may be changing industry and or function. So if you are one of those who wants to change industry or function, we have the resources and the support network here to help you make those changes. What we're excited about right now, I'm going to have the team share me in what we're excited about. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael to talk about the Business Plus Impact Initiative and the Impact Studio.
Awesome. I'm super excited about this. I have a nonprofit background myself, and Ross is one of only 2 top 10 business schools that is a public university. And I think as part of that, we have a commitment to Southeast Michigan and creating leaders around the world who are going to use business to make the world a better place. And so this year we've launched the Business Plus Impact Initiative. It kind of happened by happenstance, really. We have a marketing professor who created an algorithm that can predict with over 90% accuracy if a home is affected by lead pipes. Now, this machine learning algorithm will save the city of Flint alone over $10 million. And our students have been working with him on thinking about ways to implement that for other municipalities across the country and what that looks like in sharing this resource. And it was such a good experience that our dean decided to make this a permanent commitment for the school and develop a class around it. So we launched the Impact Studio. Just down the hall from us right now is this physical space where our students use design thinking to solve wicked problems that our world is facing. And so it's an incredible space where our students are working in design thinking. It's also a really good example of how interdisciplinary the Ross experience is. So that students come from the School of Public Health, the School of Public Policy, the School of Social Work, and combine together to work on different topics. This year's theme is actually financial inclusivity and access to capital. Here in Detroit, 15% of the population doesn't even have access to a bank. And so our students are thinking about how to work around that and some solutions for that, and we're really excited to see where that goes.
Great. Another thing we're excited about is the launch of our new Pinkert Scholars Program. Through the generous donation of one of our alumni, we have created full tuition scholarships for students interested in healthcare. It's a cohort program where you will have access to different lunch and learns and workshops, plus mentoring from alumni who are working in healthcare fields. And so this is the first year that we're doing it. We have a number of students who are really excited about being Pinkert Scholars, and we're excited to welcome some more in the coming year. Another thing we're really excited about is our community building initiatives and focus on health and wellness. So the MBA Program Office works very closely with various student groups and individual students to create initiatives that will help students in the community feel more connected. Now, while our class size is 420 and we break that down into 5 sections of 85-ish students, which that becomes your family within the larger program, students also wanted more, greater ability to develop deeper connections at a more micro level. So and to learn more about each other and the different backgrounds that people bring. So one of the things that we just launched a couple weeks ago is something called Food, Friends, and Culture, where we feature speakers, student speakers, who talk about their backgrounds growing up in a particular area of the world or a particular race or ethnicity, to share their experience, their food, as well as something about traditions from their backgrounds. We also have health and wellness initiatives because we know that the MBA experience can be very stressful, and the type of students who want to do an MBA tend to be very type A. And so we have built into the program a number of things to support students in their health and wellness. Starts at orientation, where we have a session on living a good life to encourage students to stay true to your values and to look out for your health and wellness and not just be so focused on doing school and getting a job, and to supporting each other. We also have students who have created something called the Comfort Zone, which creates time and space for students to gather and to take a mental break and to support each other throughout the stresses of the MBA program. We're also excited about some of our global opportunities, and I'm going to turn that over to Brian.
Great. Thanks, Sujin. Like Michael said, this is really an exciting place to be. And what I really love about Ross is that we'll see issues around the globe and really use our resources to address those. And the new International Investment Fund is a great example of that. Basically, what happened was that our Zell Lurie Institute and our William Davidson Institute established an organization that was helping small to medium businesses actually build their businesses. So this is a nonprofit institute called the Michigan Academy for the Development of Entrepreneurs. They were actually training entrepreneurs, small to medium enterprises in India about how to be successful. What they found was that we would give them a bunch of training, and there weren't a lot of resources from a financial standpoint to actually support those. So that's where the International Investment Fund was born. And so now we're working on evaluating those businesses, and by 2020 or the end of 2020, our students will be responsible for making their first investment in this fund and then actually building and managing that fund. So it's another opportunity for people and students who are interested in not just learning about entrepreneurship and not just learning about financing and venture capital, but putting their hands on this and to see the different nuances across the globe in a different country. So I'm really excited about this. And again, it's another example of how we're able to use a lot of our resources here at Ross and the breadth of those resources to come together and come up with real solutions for our students.
And second-year students are excited to be taking a semester or a quarter abroad starting next term. They're going to places like Paris and Argentina and China. So we've got lots of partnerships, 20 different partnerships around the world where students can do an exchange.
Yeah, I think one of the most frequently asked questions I get on the road that people forget about is Ross ends earlier than almost any other business school in the country, and most internships will start on June 1st. So you have the month of May to have a lot of flexibility and do some different things. So we have these really cool 2-week immersion courses that allow you to have a global business experience and sort of a study abroad without passing up some of the electives during a full term in Ann Arbor. So those are really exciting. They're in Israel, Germany, and Japan. So something that's pretty unique to Ross as well.
So if you were looking for a large alumni network, we've got the biggest around, the largest living alumni network, 500, actually this should be updated, it's more than 600,000 living alumni around the world that have the Block M as their alma mater. We're in more than 100 countries around the world. but it's more than just about the size. It's the passion and the excitement of the Michigan Alumni Network wherever you go. If you wear a Block M piece of clothing, I guarantee you, you will get at least one Go Blue, because it's such an iconic and recognizable brand, and people are very excited to support each other in the Michigan Alumni Network. Another thing that's really exciting that we have that no other school has is something called the Alumni Advantage, which is lifelong professional support. So the way we look at it, it's not just a 2-year investment that you're making when you pay for your MBA, it's a lifelong investment, and we invest in you back by giving you free access to executive education throughout your lifetime. That means that you can take courses with our esteemed faculty when you're working 5, 10, 15 years out and you want to brush up on something or learn something new. You can take advantage of those exec ed courses.
Yeah, the other thing that I'll add to that, as an alum, I recently had a classmate that reached out to me and asked about career coaching, and if we had resources
that's right.
where there were professionals that would help them in this stage of their career. And I was able to give them a number just to call. And so if you can imagine being established in a career and really wanting to revisit your career path, we have the resources here that can continue to help you to do that.
So it's a dedicated career coach for our alumni. Let's move on to our application differentiators. So you can see this short list of what's different from other schools in terms of how we do our application. Only 1 rec letter instead of 2 compared to other schools. Some even have 3. And our rationale is the difference between rec letter 1 and rec letter 2 was generally pretty small. And so it's a heavy lift for applicants and for recommenders to have to do that letter. So because we got enough information out of 1, we said, we only are going to ask you 1. And there's also the common recommendation form, which many schools are a part of, so that your recommender doesn't have to do so many different forms. We also have short answer essay options. They are 100 words or less, and we love reading these. We thought long and hard about what those questions should be. They highlight the things that we're interested in learning about you, and we recommend that those be personal as opposed to professional examples, although professional examples could be personal as well. I have a few sample essays myself that you can find on my blog, which we'll add a link to in the chat box in just a minute. We also do something called the team exercise, which we can talk about a little bit later, but it's something that is highly encouraged but not required to do. We created this because it shows what we value and what we're looking for. We value teamwork, collaboration, and good communication skills. And while you can demonstrate some of that through your application and through your one-on-one interview, the best way to really gauge teamwork skills is to watch you in action. This is something that you don't need to prepare for. It's just about being yourself and engaging with others in a productive exercise that we have you do. And then we now accept 3 different tests of English, the TOEFL, the Pearson test of English, and the IELTS. So any one of those will do. I'll turn it over to Michael to talk about our round 2 timeline.
Yeah, well, before we dig into tips and recommendations to help you complete your application, we thought it'd be helpful to give you a sense of what the application cycle will look like in round 2. It's our biggest round, so there's a lot going on. Sujim, I by the way, will give her credit. We all sort of lobbied her to push back the deadline a few days and make it so you weren't filling out essays on New Year's Eve. So you have until January 6th. And don't worry about submitting early. Most people actually submit the night before, and that's okay. We don't open any application until they all come in.
And in the 15 years that I've been here, our system has never crashed.
That's right. It's true. And ultimate jinx right there. So because we get so many applications in round 2, it's definitely Ross's biggest round. We do invitations for interviews in 2 waves. Ross interviews are by invitation only. And there'll be 2 waves. There's no rhyme or reason to the waves. It's just we can only read so many applications so fast. But what we tend to do is send out 2 waves of invitations in mid to late January. As you can see here, the team exercise will be hosted on every interview day in Ann Arbor, but also in Tokyo and Sao Paulo. I was actually just reaching out and started planning the Sao Paulo event yesterday, so we're excited about it. The ones internationally will probably be the first week of February. Interview days in Ann Arbor are hosted all throughout February. They're Mondays, Fridays, and Saturdays. And what we'll do is, after you've submitted your application, all applicants will receive an email with all the interview dates in Ann Arbor. It tends to be a little bit of a quick race and pretty difficult to get on-campus interview spots. So we'll let you know exactly when interview invitations are coming out, and pay attention to your inbox. It's pretty important stuff, and we'd love to see you in Ann Arbor, and then decisions will be released in mid-March. So things move fairly quickly. We're excited.
Okay, so here we get to some of the most frequently asked questions. All of us have been on the road over the last, 6-ish months, and we've been meeting prospective students, and we get questions through email as well, and so we're highlighting the ones that we get asked most frequently. The first one, of course, is, should I retake the GMAT or GRE? I want to take this one because I have a strong opinion about it. And my answer is, if you're not in the range, absolutely retake it. You want to put your best foot forward. And if you think that you've got this great essay and a great rec letter, but your GMAT is a 400, there's just no way that we can admit you. So put yourself in the best position possible. You've got one shot, conceivably, or if you don't get in, you got another shot. But hopefully you want to get in the first time, and you can do that best by putting your best foot forward with a high score. We like to see that if you haven't scored in our range, that you have taken it more than once, because it really shows that you're truly dedicated to the mission of getting an MBA, and that you are someone who will try to put your best foot forward in everything that you do. We do want to see the multiple scores because then it shows us how you've done and what kind of effort that you've put into it, and not just, well, this is the best I can do, and I'll just take my chances on something else. That said, just because you're slightly below our average, which was 719, let's say you've got a 710, it doesn't mean you should absolutely retake it. It's just being in the range. Our 80% range was last year 650 to 750, so you want to be in there somewhere. And so recognize that we get, I think our GMAT average for applicants was quite high, so you want to put your best foot forward.
Yeah, the one thing that I'll add to that is you do want to be in the range, but if you feel like you're in the range and you have not put your best foot forward, you have another test in you, and you have time to take it, feel free to take that. I think sometimes people believe if you take it multiple times, it's looked on negatively.
Not at all.
To Jen's point, it's not looked at negatively at all. So definitely, put your best foot forward and take it again if you think you can do better.
We like the strivers.
Yeah.
And I'll just get out ahead of a question that came in early already. But we really are agnostic between the GMAT and the GRE. I think there are some other top schools, honestly, I've been on panels and they say it and then they joke after that, but we really want to see the GMAT. We really don't feel that way. There are a significant number of GRE students in our class. The numbers show it. Sujin actually asked our team a few months ago to sort of run the numbers behind how are students who take the GRE doing in our class. They do just as well in the core curriculum, and they get just as good, if not better, jobs. So we feel really confidently that they're equivalent exams. You can see the score ranges for both on our class profile, but I wouldn't worry too much about that or overthink that.
So when can I submit a new score?
Oh, this is such an ambiguous question. It gets tricky to answer, but here's what I'll say. First of all, we can't guarantee you anything on this one. We get this question a lot. We try to be as generous and helpful in this as realistically possible. What I mean by that is, usually if you submit a new score, it's helpful. We will look at it as much as we can when it's relevant. I can't guarantee when somebody reads your application, but generally speaking, anything in the month of January will still be helpful for us to evaluate if you're a good candidate for an interview. We usually have a few weeks in January as we're reading applications for the first time, and so if you think your score is okay, you really want to get your round 2 application in, but you have a GMAT scheduled for January 8th, that's fine. Go ahead, and it will most likely be relevant. The other part of this that also is relevant is there are a lot of folks who have a pretty good score that's actually at our average, but know they can do better or want to put their best foot forward for scholarships. And so if you submit a score in early or mid-February, there's a really good chance we're going to take a close look at that and have that be part of our evaluation before final decisions in March. So generally, you can submit a new score at any time. The earlier, the better, but you have a good sense of our timeline, and hopefully that's helpful.
Brian, how does the AdCom define fit?
That's a great question. That's why it's on the slide, right?
And we care because we're all Michigan alums.
Absolutely. So FIT really gets into, do you value the types of things that we value? Do you have a similar type of spirit that we have? Sujin talked about our alums and how you can say go blue and people want to help you out when they find out that you're an alum. And that's really something that we hold dear. I think what fit is not is whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. Sometimes people feel like, oh, I have to be so extroverted to fit. And actually, we have people here who are very introverted and very extroverted. So it's less about, your degree of introversion. It's more about what you value. Do you like to be in team environments? Do you have a pay it forward kind of spirit about you? Those are the things that we really think about in terms of defining fit.
Of course, we expect that you'll be really smart and really accomplished academically, professionally, but it's that that spirit of wanting to work with other people and motivating others to push themselves and challenging yourself to push yourself as well. And this is a really safe place to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a supportive community that wants to see you succeed. They want to encourage you to go beyond who you might be if you were just by yourself. And this is a really great place to do it because of our community. Michael, should I do the team exercise?
Oh, yes, of course. We developed it for a reason. Here's the thing. We don't want to stress you out. It is optional. It is absolutely optional. There are going to be candidates in certain regions. We unfortunately just don't have the staff or time to host the team exercise all over the world in round 2. We picked a couple of regions. We understand that you might be somewhere where it's a really expensive flight to go do the team exercise. It is not required. There's hundreds of students in our class now who weren't able to do the team exercise. That all being said, if you can, we would really love you to. The goal of the team exercise is really for it to help your application. It is very much something to help add to your application and give us a sense of how you would fit in our class and communicate with your classmates and add value. And it's not an exercise designed to eliminate somebody or for you to be competing with others at your table. That is not the idea of the exercise. And so definitely, if you can make it, we'd love to have you participate. Again, you can do it at any interview day in Ann Arbor, but if you can't make it, don't stress too much. It is an optional part of our process, but a great way to sort of add to your application and give us insight into something we really can't see, how you work in teams and how you communicate. We just don't get enough of that in the application, which is why we do it.
Yeah. The other thing that I'll add is that if you are able to attend an on-campus team exercise, it gives you another opportunity to really kick the tires on our program as well. A lot of times you think of the AdCom as evaluating you. In this process, you should really be evaluating the schools too. And so in round 2, one of the great things about our team exercises is that they happen in the cold as well.
I think it's great, but
right. And honestly, what we find is that when people come here in the cold, they say it's not what we thought it was. It isn't. It's not that bad. People are able to really navigate, and it's a great city. So another opportunity to come to campus, and it's really another data point for you to really make that decision about whether to come here.
Just one very quick thing to clarify, the team exercise is part of the invitation to your interview day as a whole. So they are part of the same process. So you can't do the team exercise and then interview at a different point. It's connected to the same event, and it's by invitation only.
If you connect with any of our students or our recent alums who have participated in the team exercise, I think what you'll hear is that they really we're glad that they did that they opted into it, because not only did they get to check out Ann Arbor and Ross, but they also got a better sense for who their classmates might be. Because on any given interview day, we may have anywhere from 50 to 80 interviewees, and you're all in this together, and you'll be in a smaller group where you're connecting with people on a very personal level, working on this exercise for 30 minutes. And so it was a great way to get a feel for what might my experience be like going to school here with these people. I have a funny anecdote. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, we had a snowstorm on one of our February interview dates, and we scrambled to accommodate people who had come from all over the world, actually, to come to Ann Arbor to do the team exercise. And our interviewers came in, our interviewees, we did the next day because Ann Arbor was shut down. And of the people who came to that interview day and that we admitted, the vast majority of them enrolled.
Absolutely.
The weather did not deter them at all. In fact, it was kind of a bonding experience. What you'll find is that the warmth of the community and it's a very accessible, walkable city. It really lured them in. Even our Californians and our Indians, people who are used to the warmth, really end up loving it here. So if you have any concerns about that, reach out to some of our student ambassadors to see what their experience has been like. Let's talk about what we look for in each component, each major component of the application itself. So who wants to take on resume?
I'll take that one. Resume is actually one of my favorites. I think of the resume as my first impression of the candidate. So just like if you were to see someone across the room, that's how the resume is.
Do you ever have love at first sight?
Actually, I absolutely do. And what I love about a resume is when it's very neat, number one. So it's very neat, it's well spaced, things aren't crammed together, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
you put yourself together really well.
Absolutely. Where I can follow the timeline, so all the dates are on one side, all the places are on another side, where it talks about what you've actually accomplished, not just what your job role is, but some accomplishments, some data. If you're able to give me a sense for what you accomplished in terms of or compared to other people in that role. One thing that you have to keep in mind is when someone is evaluating that resume, they may not be in your specific industry or function. So that resume should give us a sense for how you perform versus others in that role, but it also shouldn't be overly jargon heavy where someone that isn't from that background may not understand that. It should be, hopefully it's free of gaps, but if there are resume gaps, we'll talk about that in the essay, but that's a good one. We want to know a little bit about your accomplishments outside of work as well. So make sure that you leave a little room to include information about what you're interested in, some different areas that you might volunteer in, and those types of things. But really, that resume is going to give us a sense for how you are professionally. The other thing I'll say is, I typically say if you have less than 10 years work experience, put it all on one page. Sometimes people feel like that's limiting. I actually think that it's helpful because what that does is that requires you to really think about the most impactful experiences that you have and to put those on that resume. So it's a little bit like your greatest hits. And the things that you really want to bring to the fore. So that's the other thing that I'd say is make sure that it's one page.
I'll just add a couple of really quick things that I've been seeing in round one that I think are interesting. One is I feel like there's this really bizarre unwritten rule that every job you've ever had has to have equal length on your resume, and it's not actually that helpful or relevant. I think it's fair to say in almost all cases, what you're doing now is a lot more impactful and relevant to your MBA application than what you were doing when you were 21 and your first job out of undergrad. And so Brian was saying, and rightfully so, like we're looking for one page. That's what an MBA resume looks like typically. That's valuable real estate. So be careful. You don't want to necessarily waste space on some of your experiences in a job that were just okay or really focused on sort of execution when you were just starting out. And we're really interested in some of the things you're doing now. And so I would focus a little bit more on some of your more recent experiences is I think a really good way to look at it. And then really, Brian mentioned this, but I can't emphasize enough, we've been walking folks to interviews, and on the way out, somebody will come out from an interview and be like, oh my gosh, I had this crazy thing in common with my interviewer. We had this experience together. And those things matter sometimes. They can be really helpful in an interview. Here at Ross, we call them semi-blind interviews, but the interviewer has only seen your resume and they haven't seen the rest of your application. So if there's something that's a big part of who you are, that's a really important experience in your life, you want to include some of that, even if it's outside of work, on a personal part of your resume, because it could add to some really interesting conversations in the interview process.
One of the things that applicants worry about the most is, how can I differentiate myself? You know, if you're coming from a background that might be highly represented in an applicant pool, whether you're a consultant or you're from a country that has a lot of applicants, they worry, you may be one of those who worries about how am I going to stand out. The resume is one good place to stand out, not just in how well it's put together, but in the details about what you've accomplished, what your impact was in each job. So even if you worked in the same company as 3 other applicants, let's say, you probably did not do the exact same thing and have the exact same impact over the exact same amount of time. So that's already one way that you can differentiate yourself. Your path to your current role may also be different. You may be in the same role right now, but maybe you started off in a different company or a different industry, so that path is something that we look at as well. And then finally, as Michael mentioned, the interests, skills, hobbies, those things that you might include on the bottom, those are going to be your biggest differentiators, because no two people are going to have the same work and personal interests. We've never seen that in all of our years of looking at applications.
And if we do, we'll introduce you guys when you're students.
But it's really kind of cool when you may have a same interest with your interviewer or with someone who is reading your application. For example, there's someone who wrote in their resume that they speak Russian, and guess what? They happen to have a Russian interviewer, and so you might be tested, or you might have this really interesting conversation about your experiences, either learning Russian or growing up in Russia, whatever it might be. So finding those uncommon commonalities can be a real connection maker. This is just a tip for life too, not just for the application process, but including the things that are significant in your life or notable are things that we like to see.
Yep, and one very small point, one ineffective way to differentiate yourself is by overly differentiating the format of the resume.
Yeah, don't get all fancy.
Sometimes we'll see resumes that look like newsletters and that. We understand that you might be creative, but in this process, keeping a standard format is absolutely fine.
That's not to say that we're discouraging creativity in the MBA experience, just discouraging it in the resume. Let's move on to rec letters.
Yeah, this is crazy tactical, but we see it tons in round 2, so I have to mention it, is give your recommender time. Start this part of the process now. The last thing you want your recommender doing is filling out your recommendation on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, right? They're probably not going to be very thoughtful or put a lot of time into it, and I can't tell you how many times in round 2 we see incomplete applications because of your recommender. And that's really disappointing for you. You've put in all this effort, months of time, and we can't actually evaluate your application if it's not complete. So take the time to remind them and start that process now. Give them a length of time to get it right. That's also related to another tip I always give, but you tend to be able to see in recommendation letters the recommenders who really talk to the applicant about the MBA process, and it often leads to a really thoughtful recommendation that's more meaningful than others in the process. And what I mean by that is it is absolutely okay, if not even encouraged, to go out for coffee and tell your recommender why you want to get an MBA, what sort of skill set you're looking to gain, why you're excited about this process, and remind him or her of some of the things they should emphasize in your letter. What are your strengths? If you've been working for the same person for a long time, they might not remember some of your awesome accomplishments from 2 or 3 years ago. Think about how busy they are. And so it's absolutely okay to take some time to, maybe even give them a very basic outline. You don't want to write it for them. We see that all the time. We've sent each other ones from round 1 that are really funny, that are like, we just know. But it's okay to remind them of some of the things you really want them to highlight and put some thought into it. I think that prep leads to better letters. And then last thing I'll offer on this one is, because we only have one, I can't emphasize enough how important it is for us to see candidates get an evaluation of them in a work setting. It doesn't mean it has to be your current direct supervisor. We know annual performance reviews are coming up. You might be up for a bonus. We don't want to jeopardize that, but think about finding maybe a former supervisor or somebody who you're responsible to work for in general to have them do it. The flip side of that is don't just pick somebody with a really big title because you think it looks interesting. We've gotten letters from former presidents and from celebrities. Those aren't as effective as the people that know you really well.
Yeah, for sure. And Sujin touched on the different attributes that we're looking at when we talked about fit, and she's talked about professional experience. Your rec letter is one area where we really get a sense for your professional experience. So to Michael's point, having someone that can specifically speak to your contributions in your role, your strengths, your weaknesses. Those are things that are really going to help us to evaluate the quality of your professional experience, the types of skills that you develop that might help you in the classroom or help you on projects. So that's what we're specifically looking for. In that, I can tell you a number of times where a recommender has said, this person is just an incredible applicant. I would love to have them work on any project of mine. And that was about it. And some people might look at that as a good recommendation. Absolutely does not help us in the evaluation process, and that hurt those candidates when we have to read that, because we can't judge their professional ability, and we'll note that as well. So make sure that you are having those prep conversations with those recommenders, that it is someone who knows your strengths, your weaknesses, your contributions, and someone that's going to get you that letter on time. Because if that letter comes in after the deadline, your whole application is late.
And then let's move on to the essays before we move on to the questions that have been posed online. So tips on essays.
I'll share a couple that have been interesting to me reading round one. I feel like we get there's two groups of essays. There's one that are the short answer prompts that Sujin already mentioned. It's really helpful sometimes to hear personal stories, and I know Brian has some strong feelings usually about that one. So I'll talk about the other one. The other one is basically, this isn't what the question says, but it's basically, what do you want to do with your life after business school? And so I think we get a lot of folks who answer that essay with why Ross, or why they should come to Ross because it fits their career. And we don't actually ask that in the question. It's really frustrating. We see it in round one a lot. And I feel like other schools ask why they're a school, and we get, when you do that, you sort of list the laundry list of things that came from the website, and it's not all that helpful. So don't waste space on that. There's only a certain amount of words. We really want to get a healthy understanding of what your transferable skills are, and how you plan to apply those to your post-MBA career, especially if you're making a fairly significant career pivot. Related to that, I also don't think it's necessary or required to share a specific title at a specific company. First of all, most of the time, 80-90% of the time, they won't happen, or it's not that relevant.
Or because you change your mind.
Yeah, and you're encouraged to explore some different things. What we really want to know is that you have a plan. And so showing us that you have an understanding of what your transferable skills are, the industry you're interested in, why you're passionate about that industry, that's a much more compelling essay than just sort of a laundry list of companies or things that are available at Ross. So something to think about for the career essay.
For sure. The other thing that I'll add to the career essay, then I'll talk about the short answers, is that one thing that I like to see is that people answer the question. So to Michael's point about answering a question that we didn't ask, such as why Ross, we want you to answer the question that we did ask. And honestly, and this is a preference, and you can take this or leave this, but I'd like to see that answer in the first paragraph. Just answer the question. What do you want to do when you grow up? Tell me what you want to do when you grow up, and then tell me the rest. Sometimes when people, start to talk about when they were born, what they really liked, it takes us a while. And honestly, what happens is that oftentimes people forget to even answer the question. So
main point up front.
Main point up front.
You're going to learn in business school.
Absolutely. If you put that up front, that's gonna help you. In terms of the short answers, Sujin mentioned how much we like the short answers because you give us the answers to the questions that we're asking, and it's really getting at those attributes. And really, the biggest piece there is be authentic. I mean, that's what we want to understand. Sujin also mentioned that people want to stand out or differentiate themselves. The best way to differentiate yourself is to just be you. If you're trying to be somebody that you think we want to read about or to see, I guarantee you 80% of the people that are applying think that we want to see the same thing. And if you present that person, you're just presenting the same person that 80% of the people might. I mean, it goes against what you want to do. So answer the question. I mean, I would say I wouldn't overthink this. Again, it should be authentic. I would have some people that you really know and who really know you read those answers to make sure that it sounds like you. In those questions, we're trying to assess fit. We want to understand what you value. We want to understand what motivates you. We want to understand how you operate in different situations. So feel free to share some of those personal attributes that may not be covered in other areas of the application. We already get plenty about your professional ability through that recommendation, through the career essay to an extent, and through your resume. This is actually a good time for you to share who you are, what you're about, and kind of what makes you tick.
Yeah, we were just talking in an admissions committee about Applicants, there are a couple of applicants in round one who had this really complicated career essay with a whole bunch of jargon. It wasn't really clear what they wanted to do. And then when they talked about it in their interview this month, it was really clear. It was a great answer. So don't overthink it. It's just like sometimes, you force it a little bit and think we need to hear something really complicated, but just be yourself.
Okay, we're going to cover a few next steps, and then we'll get to your questions in the 10 minutes that we have remaining. So one of the things that we encourage you to do is to register for webinars. We've got a whole bunch of them coming up. Hopefully the chat box has a link to them. We've got them around different aspects of our academic experience as well as different career paths.
The women's community at Ross, we have a big webinar coming up. That's all going to be awesome.
Awesome. So what we have on those are current students who can share their perspectives on each of these things and how it happens at Ross. It's not just one of us. We've got upcoming holiday coffee chats with current students in your city as they go back to their homes or travel somewhere around the world. They are happy to host coffee chats where they talk with prospective students who may have questions about the student experience. They are not admissions staff. They are students who can share their perspective. You can also contact a student ambassador. They are on our website. The link is hopefully in the chat box. And we've got about 200 of them from all over the world who are coming from different backgrounds with different career goals, and you can filter based on those things. And then we've got this really great student-hosted, student-created MBA podcast that talks about a variety of aspects of the Ross MBA experience. The last one that just came out, I think it was a week ago, was around the partner experience and how if you are coming to school, if you're coming to Ann Arbor with a partner, male or female, what are the things that partners can do, and what is that experience like? I can tell you, come graduation, the partners are just as sad to leave Ann Arbor as our graduates are because they're so integrated into the experience. Okay, we'll get to our questions.
Yeah, I've been seeing a bunch about reapplicants. We love reapplicants. We have a number of them in our class now. So there's ambassadors who are reapplicants that you could be talking to. But what are some of our best tips for reapplicants to think about as they approach this application?
Well, I think the biggest tip is that we want to see some growth between last year and this year, or a couple years ago, whenever you applied the first time. We do have a bridge version of the application where you can actually submit a letter that talks about what's different this year versus last year. So if there are additional projects that you've worked on, you can include that. If there are additional promotions that you've received, you can talk about those things. But then also, you can retake the test. I mean, that's a big one as well. And I think that a lot of our students will be a little bit shy about doing that. Again, we don't penalize you for taking the GMAT or GRE multiple times. You've had some time to prepare for it again. So take this time to retake that test and see if you can do a little bit better on it.
Generally, there will be 3 reasons that people are not admitted. One is your academics is not in the admissible range. There's not a hard cutoff number, but we just need evidence that you can do the work that you're going to be happy to do in the MBA program. Second thing is you may be a little bit light on your career achievements. It's not so much about the length of time. Our applicants have anywhere from 2 to 15 years of work experience, and you've got to demonstrate how you've made an impact in the organization that you've been in and your maturity and readiness to be in an MBA program where the average work experience is 5 years and the average age is 27, 28. But again, the range is quite broad from 24 to 40 years old in any given year. So that's another thing. And the final thing is around the essays, it could be that you were very unclear about what your career goals and who you are through the essays. So you want to make sure that you take a look at your application, your original application, if you aren't admitted the first time, and ask yourself those 3 things. Did I demonstrate the academic ability well enough? Do I have enough career achievements? And then finally, was I clear enough in my essays about who I am and what I want to do?
Yeah, self-awareness is key. Just be self-aware throughout this process is always the best tip. We're getting a lot of questions about financial aid, and that's super important, so I think it's worth talking about for a couple of minutes. One thing, I'll give the logistics because I think our financial aid process is so much clearer than some other schools, and we try to make it as easy to understand as possible. A couple of things around that. One, you don't need to fill out any separate applications or essays or apply to specific scholarships that are named. It's all a general part of our process. We do all of that for you. So all the tips we've been sharing and all just putting together a good application for admission, those are the best tips for getting a scholarship. The other thing I'll say is we let you know the day you're admitted exactly what your scholarships are so that you can make an apples-to-apples decision about the program that's the best fit for you. We know there are some other programs that are sort of make you wait or, spend a month or two waiting to hear back some news, and then it's not that good news, and you have to rush to make a decision. We don't want to do that to you. So we'll let you know right away. But Sujin, you're signing off on all the scholarships. We're always trying to get applicants as much as possible, but what are some of the things we really care about or, should think about if you really want a scholarship?
So I want to asterisk something that Michael said before I talk about that, and that is if you are a dual degree applicant, you may not know the financial aid package or the scholarships from the other school. It is Ross that tells you your scholarship offer at the time of admission. So you may not know your entire package if you're a dual degree applicant at the time of admission. What we look for in the application is everything that we care about. I mean, generally, it's, are you really good academically? Have you contributed a lot professionally? Are you a good fit? Will you be a contributor in our community? Do you have demonstrated evidence of having been someone who takes initiative and will support others along the way? And of course, we're looking for diversity of backgrounds and experiences in our class as well. So all of those things are the things that we take into consideration. The same thing that we look for on the admission side is also the same thing that we look for on the scholarshiping side. And for us, it's not a separate office that determines the scholarship offers. It is this committee. It is all the people that you saw in that first picture. We're the ones who, as we're reading the applications and as we're making admissions decisions, we're determining who to give offers to and how much.
Yeah, and I would just add, we're a little bit limited in the exact numbers we can share. I don't have it in front of us, but I would say, I think confidently, like the past year was, one of the more significant scholarship years we've ever had. We've increased our support for international students, particularly considering some of the geopolitical atmosphere and some of the questions about studying in the U.S., and we understand some of that. So we've really made scholarships a commitment for us going forward, and we expect to do that this year.
Absolutely. Our scholarship budget has been growing every year for the past, as long as I've been here, actually. And so we're excited to bring in another great class and hopefully give as much money out as we can.
That's right. So we have time for one last question, and I guess I'll be cheeky here. And usually the optional essay is the catch-all for anything we missed in the application. You might have missed in the application. So as we wrap up, what are some of the things we might have missed, but, you cover in the optional essay? Is it really optional? Do you have to put something in it? What are the types of things that would be useful in that space? We get that question all the time.
Yeah,
it's not an essay.
No, that's right. I caught
essay.
myself. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's not an essay. It is a statement. And basically the best way to use that optional statement is to think about areas of the rest of your application where there might be gaps or perceived weaknesses and address those weaknesses or question marks and put some context around that. So if your undergraduate grades suffered because of something that was happening in undergrad that was overly stressful or traumatic, maybe. If there are some specifics around your work experience that might offset that perceived weakness in your undergraduate ability. So let's say you're a liberal arts major, you don't have a lot of quant background, but you're currently working as a banker, which actually happens more often than you think. You can say, in undergrad I didn't take as many quant courses, but I now work as an investment banker, and I exhibit my quantitative ability every day in this way or that way. And again, it can just be a bullet. We don't need context around that. We don't need you to explain what investment banking is. We just need you to tell us that you're an investment banker, etc. If there are gaps in your resume, that's another good one. And people will ask, well, what is a gap? I'd say if it's more than a month, it's a gap. If we're going to see where on that resume a skip between April and it jumps to June, then May, that was a gap. I'd definitely say there to mention that. Another thing, if you are using a recommender that isn't your direct manager, we totally understand that. That happens a lot. I would say don't overstress it. Just say, that give us the context. You are up for promotion and don't want to threaten that. Your manager, your company isn't necessarily friendly to the idea of an MBA. Those are realities that you face, and feel free to share that. One of the things that I'd like to mention is that what the optional statement is not it's not a place for you to take a really good essay that you wrote for another school and to put it in, or to try to slip in something that you felt like you wanted to put on your resume but didn't have room. Really use that thoughtfully, and it should cover things that are that could be perceived question marks or gaps in the rest of your application.
It's also not a place to write a why Ross essay.
Yeah.
We technically didn't have that question as one of our essays because we don't need to know that at that time. By virtue of submitting an application, we think that you are interested in Ross. I mean, you are putting down some money and taking some time to invest in putting together an application for us. So we already know that you're interested. You can demonstrate your research once you're invited to interview, and then your interviewer will likely kind of gauge how much homework you've done at that time. So thank you all for participating on this webinar. We hope it's been helpful. If you have follow-up questions, feel free to email us at ross.umich.edu, and we'll answer those as they come in. And good luck with the applications. We're really excited to get to know you. We're really excited for January 6th, and hope you all have a great next 6 weeks as you're thinking about yourselves and your future.
Don't stress too much. Go blue.
Go Blue.
Go Blue. Go Blue. Bye.